And welcome back to American Dream Time. I am your host, Robert Doc Barham, here today to talk with you all about hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and beyond. My guest today is Randal Churchill, who is the founder, in fact, of the Hypnotherapy Training Institute located in Corte Madera, which is in the Bay Area, just north of San Francisco. Became one of the first licensed hypnotherapy schools back in 1978. He was also the first president of the American Council of Hypnotist Examiners, ACHE, the original and primary hypnotherapy certification organization, and completed his most recent term in 2012. He received his degree in psychology with honors from Sonoma State University and has completed 50,000 hours of exceptional hypnotherapy as he enters his 55th year in the field of hypnotherapy. Randal Churchill, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Doc.
Randal, would you help us out, myself and the listeners, by giving us one or more clear understandings and definitions of what is hypnosis and what is hypnotherapy?
All right. You know, it's interesting to say that hypnosis is hard to define for a couple of reasons. One is that there's so many different kinds of experiences that people can have in hypnosis, so many different aspects of it, so many different shifts when people go into hypnosis in the subconscious mind, and everybody's subjective experience is different. People who have tried to define hypnosis in just a few sentences have to leave a lot out, or come up, if they believe that's a good definition, have a pretty inferior one, in fact, because there are so many different aspects of it. Hypnotherapy is to do therapy, of course, with hypnosis, but to give you more of a sense, how would you define normal consciousness? If you're not asleep, if you're not in hypnosis, if you're not under the influence of a strong drug or alcohol or something, and you're in normal consciousness, what is normal consciousness? How do you define that? And it's the same thing with hypnosis in that there's so many different aspects. But what I can say is that, just in a nutshell, a few things about it, is that it is a natural state of mind, an altered state, but a natural state. You go into a kind of hypnotic type state when you're falling asleep at night in between waking and sleeping. When you're waking in the morning, you could be driving along and go into, kind of an automatic on a freeway and go into highway hypnosis. You could be absorbed in a good novel and be in a hypnotic state, watching a movie. So hypnosis is natural, but it opens us up to the deeper mind, the other 90% of the mind, the subconscious mind. And that is the key to powerful therapy, is accessing the subconscious mind, which is the seat of the emotions, the imagination, the memories, the instincts, the intuition. It's the part of us that dreams. It's the part of us that regulates habit patterns, automatic bodily functions, and so forth.
Now, that state that you were referring to, the state that is before you fall asleep and the state that is as you are waking up, does that have a term? Is there a term for that state?
Yes, if you're falling asleep, it's called the hypnagogic state, and if you're waking up in the morning, it's called the hypnopompic state, and that may only be very brief, or you might be kind of going in and out of sleep, half awake, whatever, but those are the terms.
Now, is there any sort of association with hypnosis or I should say perhaps, what associations are there that have been observed with brainwave activity and hypnosis and hypnotherapy?
Well, our generally, the vast majority of the time, most of our brainwaves during normal waking hours are faster brainwaves and beta brainwaves. And when people go into hypnosis, and sometimes people can go into alpha brainwaves, when they're more restful or being creative, et cetera. This is just in a nutshell, but primarily beta. In hypnosis, you go down into slower brain waves, and if you're light to medium state of hypnosis, if you're in a light state of hypnosis, you're in alpha brain waves, which are the next brainwave down. And then if you're in deep hypnosis, you're going all the way down into delta brainwaves, which are, I meant theta brainwaves, which are associated with a medium state of sleep. Now, it's not the same thing as sleep. I'm just looking at the speed of the brainwaves here to give you an idea of, hypnosis is generally a state of pretty deep relaxation, or light relaxation if you're in a light state of hypnosis. So people may only go into alpha brainwaves in a light to medium state of hypnosis. If they go very deep, they're going into theta brainwaves.
I see. So the reason I ask that in part is because that I've spoken to many people who seem to think that hypnosis is a real state of consciousness. It's a real state of mind. And so they accept that. There are, however, many people that I've spoken to over the years who they are, I think skeptical is not the right word, but they simply don't believe that hypnosis is real. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are people who think that hypnosis is something that is dangerous or something like that. Now, in the case of those folks who believe it's not real, the reason I asked about brainwave activity is to demonstrate from talking with you that there is an actual physiological correlate that's going on in the brain that during the time that an individual is experiencing hypnosis or hypnotherapy.
Yes, and this has been documented in many ways because it's not just brainwave activities, but there are physiological changes. You get galvanic skin response, and you get the warmth in the extremities. There are different biofeedback. There are different machines that are used to help people to enter hypnosis. And this is typically done, for example, if someone has had a heart attack and they need to deal with stress reduction, for example, or you're just dealing with a lot of anxiety and need to relax more, and so people are trained to go into hypnotic states. And the biofeedback technician may not even call it hypnosis; they may just call it relaxation. Mm-hmm. But they can actually get be able to document, help people to hear a certain kind of a tone when they reach alpha brainwaves, for example, to help to train them in how to relax their minds. So yes, there are physiological responses that do happen in hypnosis. And then I want to address the other thing you brought up, which is the fear that people can have, the misconceptions that can happen with hypnosis, that people think that you have to do what the hypnotist says, they lose control, whatever. In reality, people gain control in hypnosis if you're motivated. If you want to achieve something, you haven't had the willpower to do it, for example, tapping a good hypnotherapist, helping to tap you further into that motivation, or perhaps being able to do that in self-hypnosis can help people to do things that they weren't otherwise able to do. So that misconception can come from, people seeing that people do what a stage hypnotist suggests. But I've seen plenty of stage shows. I've seen people that will accept some suggestions, not others. But there's a context there. In
right.
Stage hypnosis,
right.
You're performing. You're having a chance to be an actor. And so, yes, actors do crazy or silly things, and you recognize they're an actor. And that's, the person can lose a certain amount of inhibition if they've got a good rapport with the hypnotist, and they're motivated to get up there on stage. But some people get misconceptions from seeing something like that, and other people get realizations of more of a positive attitude. Wow, look what you can accomplish. Look at how far people can go when they get into it, if they're in the mood and so forth.
Well, I remember being at the Washington, D.C. Improv, and a stage hypnotist by the name of Flip Orley was there performing. And at that time, I wasn't skeptical of hypnosis in the sense of being a non-believer or disbeliever, but I was curious just to see what a live stage hypnosis show was like. And I remember coming into the club and watching the committee or the group of folks on stage and watching Flip work as a stage hypnotist and making the positive suggestions to the folks on stage. And in fact, one of the things that I thought upon listening to the suggestions and observing the responses by the folks who were on stage is that their creativity was really, really compelling and fascinating to watch. They were really funny and really relaxed and really free in their responses and their reactions. It was really something. And in part, as a result, that's how I ended up becoming really interested in becoming a certified hypnotherapist myself, which eventually led me to come out to your school, the Hypnotherapy Training Institute, back in 2001. So will you tell me for yourself, in your own life, is there a moment or moments or events wherein you became interested in hypnosis and that state of consciousness and all that it's involved? Is something when you were younger?
Yes. In fact, I was a teenager, and I had taken an encounter group. I had skipped a year of school. I was turning 17 or about to, and I was in my. I think I just graduated. That's right. I had just turned 17. I just graduated, and I actually. What happened was that I joined some encounter groups, which were marathon group therapy sessions, and it happened to be led by a man named Gil Boyne, who was primarily a hypnotherapist and a teacher of self-hypnosis. And but at any rate, the encounter groups were very powerful for me, and as a result of that, I had a lot of stuff to work on. But as a result of that, a friend of mine I'd met from one of the encounter groups gave me some self-hypnosis because gave me some hypnosis and taught me a little bit about self-hypnosis in preparation for some minor surgery. I was going to have some minor surgery on my big toe in a week, and he gave me some hypnosis for visualizations for healing. And I when he said he was going to do that, I said, look, I understand enough about hypnosis that you can respond to suggestions, but this is something physical here. And he said, well, give it a chance. He gave some suggestions. He told me how to do some self-hypnosis for my own suggestions. And a week later, I went in for the minor surgery, and the doctor looked it over, and he was so surprised. He said, we don't need to do the surgery anymore. It's really improved. So I signed up that day for my self-hypnosis class.
Wow. That reminds... Go ahead. I'm sorry, Randal. Go ahead, Randal. I'm sorry, I accidentally cut in.
Yeah. So the person leading the self-hypnosis class was also, I took to hypnosis like a fish takes to water at doing self-hypnosis, and started practicing on friends, and I was practicing it every day myself, and the person who was doing the self-hypnosis classes was also one of the very, very few in those days. This was, 1969 and into 1970 when I took my took some classes and took some more classes, and I took the professional training classes not to become a hypnotherapist, much less a teacher, but just because I wanted to learn more. I loved it so much. I got so much from it. I practiced a little bit with friends. They really enjoyed it. And it just kind of evolved as I was going through college, that I gradually had a practice that got bigger and bigger until when I graduated, I was starting to work full-time as a hypnotherapist then. And then just a few years later became a teacher, founded one of the first state licensed schools of hypnotherapy in the United States.
Well, now, on your website, there is a recipe for outstanding therapy, and it's referring to hypnotherapy. And I would like to point out those 4 points. The first, which is the client. The second is the therapist. The third is together. And the fourth is therapist training/experience. It says the client is motivated and good work can always be done no matter how challenging the issues when the client is highly motivated in the circumstances outlined here. 2, the therapist is compassionate and centered. The Buddhist concept of detached compassion fits well here. The therapist cares and does his or her best possible work, but does not try to do the client's work. The therapist does not get caught up in the drama, but is totally present and supportive, flexible, intuitive, and creative, rather than rigidly adhering to a system of techniques. The third is together. Good rapport, enthusiasm, and positive yet realistic mental expectancy. Therapy includes working comprehensively with the whole person, including underlying issues. And fourth, therapist training/experience, a solid foundation that includes a wide variety of methods to reach and affect the subconscious, i.e. hypnosis. Randal, tell me a little bit, if you would, about that, about outstanding therapy, if you would.
Yes, I always enjoy, whenever I take another look at that. In this case, thank you for repeating it. That is so inspiring to me too. And those are the 4 keys. I will make the provocative statement that any profound therapy that has ever occurred in any kind of therapy as a result of hypnosis, and the reason I say that is because a therapist may not be trained in hypnosis, but the client, if they go into hypnosis, that's where the chance for a real major shift occurs. Because, and I'm not saying, on the other hand, that every time someone goes in hypnosis it's going to be super profound. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if this is a recipe that can lead to profound therapy, it is the recipe really in this. I say the recipe, meaning, well, maybe the therapist may not have training in hypnosis, but if the person goes into hypnosis and it's the right set of conditions, then some very powerful things can happen. Again, hypnosis is a natural state, and people can spontaneously enter it. But I want to get back to a couple of things about what you said about that. Truly, the motivation is the key thing for the client. Now, when I say that good work can always be done under these combination of circumstances where there is the motivation and the good rapport and the therapist having good training and working holistically and all of that, and not expecting things to be just wave your magic wand in 5 minutes and give some suggestions and everything's hunky-dory forever. That's not it. But within a brief, relatively brief series of sessions, some very powerful work can be done. Now, let's take an extreme example. Let's say someone has advanced cancer. That doesn't mean that they're going to get cured of that advanced cancer. The issue is that powerful work can be done. And that powerful work may be, for example, to help with pain relief, that the person may be able to have less medication, in some cases avoid medication, be more clear-headed. The person may have issues to work through with unfinished business with people in their lives, or saying goodbye to loved ones, whatever. I mean, we have to go at some point, and the person may have issues within themselves, frustrations within themselves, and to be able to reach a point of being at peace with themselves. There are different things that can be done with hypnosis, even in that case, and you can in some cases have, this is unusual, but in some cases you can have some spontaneous remission where someone has some improvement for a period of time. They not only, at the very least, it's not unusual for someone to be slowing down the advancement of the symptoms and the disease, or possibly even temporarily stopping it. But sometimes you can kind of, get a certain amount of improvement purely from the hypnosis. And there's rare cases, very rare cases of something even more profound than spontaneous remission, because spontaneous remission is, temporarily some relief from some of the symptoms, some of the disease, and all of that. But there's a great case quoted by a teacher at the Hypnotherapy Training Institute, Cheryl Canfield, who wrote the book Profound Healing, and described how she used hypnosis and other tools, walking in nature, healthy eating, and so forth. She came up with 12 steps. It's not a 12-step program, but 12 steps in the healing process that she found very valuable, that she describes in a book, Profound Healing. And and what happened with her was that she was told to put her affairs into order, figuring she had a few months to live. And she figured, well, I'll use my hypnotic meditations and I'll do these other things and maybe I'll live longer. And a year and a half or so later, she was feeling pretty good, came back to her doctor, and her doctor couldn't find it. My God, this was non-differentiated, it had spread. We got to do some more testing here. She said, no, you're not, I'm out of here. And she was diagnosed in 1989, and she is healthy now. All these years later.
In 2025?
Yeah, 2025.
Wow.
She walks 4 miles a day along the boardwalk along the coast where she lives, and no one ever walks. Someone could jog faster than her, but no one ever catches up to her on that boardwalk. No bicycles are allowed on it, and someone could jog. Otherwise, she walks fast 4 miles a day within an hour. So she is very healthy, radiantly healthy, and she feels that there was a particularly powerful hypnosis, self-hypnosis that she did, and that was a very powerful key to this amazing transformation. Now, no matter what, that's not going to happen with most people. I'm just saying that sometimes there are things that go beyond, that just there's a certain curve here, and there's some things that kind of are outside the box that are really unexplainable. But it's pretty miraculous to realize the power of the subconscious mind to the degree that it can go in some extreme, unusual examples. Again, nothing to expect or anything like that, but people can expect, if they're motivated and have realistic expectations, to be able to do something well with whatever they're working with, if they stick with it for a reasonable series of relatively brief sessions or do enough self-hypnosis with it.
Well, there's a book written by Robert Dilts called Beliefs, Robert Dilts of Neurolinguistic Programming. They're in the same region of the country. You are there in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in the 70s, he was involved early on with neurolinguistic programming down at the University of California, Santa Cruz. One of his books, the second book on beliefs, which is just called Beliefs, has a section in there in which he discusses his mother being diagnosed with cancer, and she agreed to work with her son to see what they could do to make changes and to improve her state of health. And if you read the book, and I spoke with Robert over the phone about this as well, and we corresponded back and forth via email, and he sent me some documents that were written by him and some documents written by his mother. After going through their work with neurolinguistic programming, and it's my opinion that NLP, because one of its earliest folks that they modeled was Milton Erickson, shares a lot with hypnosis and hypnotherapy. As I understand it, Robert told me that his mother went back and received a clean bill of health and ended up living more than 15 years longer after that. So there seems to be...
Fantastic. I wasn't aware of that. I'm certainly aware of Robert Dilts, but was not aware of that experience with his mother. That is beautiful. There's so much that can often be done with hypnosis, and these are some extraordinary examples.
Now, you've been involved in this for now 70, 80, 90, 2000, 10, 20. I mean, this is more than half a century that you've been involved in this sort of work. Can you share just a few examples or a couple more examples of things where you've seen some remarkable transformation in an individual?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you like a couple of different kinds of examples, but I was just thinking that I'd like to get back to saying something about neurolinguistic programming.
Sure.
That you pointed out that, the influence of Milton Erickson, who is one of the outstanding hypnotherapists of the middle of the 20th century until his death in 1980, and in fact. That he is the number one influence, and so many things that are done with neurolinguistics are done with a hypnotic state. So it is definitely a sister therapy form. It's based on, most of what they do is based on hypnosis, and there are many programs in hypnosis that are cover a combination of NLP and hypnosis. In our case, we have so many things to go into, so many different forms of hypnotherapy that we teach, that we just do a little bit of the neurolinguistics in it, although there's also a certain amount of overlap that is done by both hypnosis and NLP that we do. So maybe in a way we're doing more NLP than we specifically address that, okay, this is something that is a form of NLP, and sometimes the semantics are a little different and so forth, whether it's future pacing or post-hypnotic suggestions or whatever. Yeah. But anyway, so on the subject of a very profound physical healing, one of my favorite examples is something that is a part of, I've written a number of books that are, major texts in the field, and one book that is as yet unpublished is a book on idiomotor methods, which is a form of, there's so many forms of hypnotherapy, as I say, and go beyond direct suggestion. There's indirect suggestion and metaphors and regression and dream work and so on and so forth. But idiomotor methods are something that is not done by a lot of hypnotherapists, but is very, very important. I mean, some hypnotherapists have some knowledge that might be limited, but there's so much that can be said for what I usually use with idiomotor is finger signals, eliciting information from the subconscious. And so in a session I did with a woman named Karen many years ago that was recorded, that was videotaped, at the time, was that she had advanced multiple sclerosis, and she figured she had was affecting her vision and dexterity to a substantial degree. This was a wife of a student in the program, and he was trying some hypnotic methods and wasn't making any significant difference. And so we brought her into the classroom, and I did this long session with her of asking her a whole series of questions to get down to the depths of her subconscious mind to elicit information. And then what I did was started working with her to transform subconscious beliefs. So a very interactive process, and I call it the idiomotor imprint method, where I'm combining learning things with idiomotor responses. It's from training the subconscious, teaching the subconscious, overcoming misconceptions, giving new ideas and new things new inspiring visions to accept, and so forth. And she had a remarkable improvement, and I saw her again in class 3 weeks later, and the film, they don't show the film anymore in class because the initial session is a very slow motion session of an hour, more than an hour and a half of, questions, and then waiting for a while for the answer, and then another question. But her whole demeanor was so tremendously different. She was, so somber, and had a hard time communicating. And 3 weeks later, she was just so high and inspired and just just radiant, and I did another follow-up session after that. But the key was the first session. The follow-up sessions had to do with her workaholism and some other issues to help her with the long term to have a more balanced life. And but that the key transformation in her subconscious was so profound that what happens, it's possible in rare cases that someone can have a temporary spontaneous remission with MS, but it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away, and meaning specifically, for example, physiologically, there are certain lesions in the brain, and when someone's in remission, they still have those lesions, and they'll be with you, and maybe they'll have remission for some months, a year or two. But 5 years later, she was fine and wanted to go in because she was afraid it was going to come back. And the astonishing thing was they did the CAT scan and those lesions were gone. Now, I've had physicians in my program that said that's just unheard of. So that's a really, I mean, this is not your everyday session, but it's like one of those outliers that show the power of the subconscious. Another kind of an example. So we've looked at a couple of examples here that had to do with incredible physical transformations, but of course a majority of what hypnosis does is work with mental issues in whatever way, and that can be any number of things. I mean, insomnia, for example, is well, that's a physical issue, but it's a mental one, primarily a mental one. Usually, unless there's some physiological issue that you need to see the doctor for and deal with. But people use hypnosis for, so many, you name it. If someone has a goal that they want to improve in some way, they can use hypnosis. But it's also used for all kinds of physical issues, yes. So majority of my clients, and I'm not doing private sessions anymore in recent years, but continue to demonstrate therapy in class. And the majority of therapy in the 50,000 hours of working with people in therapy sessions, most of them have been working, not so directly with physical issues or having the physical issues be secondary to dealing with some kind of achievement or overcoming a fear or phobia or working, breaking a habit or addiction, dealing with relationship issues, confidence issues, public speaking, on and on and on. But so another example then that was a particularly powerful one was that a mother and a son came into the class. This was about 10 years ago. I love telling stories because I can tell stories from last semester or from 45 years ago. It's been a wonderful journey. So this one was about 10 years ago, and he seemed like a nice guy. Really liked him and all, but it turned out that he volunteered for a therapy session, and when we got into the advanced part of our program, which is level 3, we have 200-hour program to become a certified hypnotherapist, and very comprehensive program, and people come from all over the world to our accelerated classes that are, come in for 50 hours a week of training, the vast majority in the classroom with some homework that totals 50 hours a week. And so this was in the third week. We're in the advanced portion of the program, and he volunteered, and he was describing how he's been so, even though he outwardly seems fine, that ever since he was in his early teens, he's just felt being so wound up that he feels like he could explode at any time. And so we did a regression session with him, and it turned out he went back to when his stepfather was drunk and pulled out a gun and was aiming it at his mother, and he jumped in front of the stepfather, who was, I believe, 14, and was able to wrestle the gun away and get his stepfather out of the house and all of that. But
that would have been really frightening.
Oh my God, yeah. So there was this terrible, imprint experience, single impact learning experience that was a misconception, but a fear of whether some terrible thing could happen, life or death thing could happen, and he was in front of that gun it was his mother and it was him as he wrestled the gun away, and so I interviewed him, whenever we finished the session, it felt really good. Then I always have an interview with someone a week later. And he said, it just went away immediately. I am so at peace. I can't tell you what this means. And his mother talked to me at the break along the way and said, what can I do for you? Can I give you my home? And of course, we weren't, she wasn't serious about that. Yeah. And all. She was trying to communicate how much it meant to her that obviously how much it meant to both of them that this was such an incredible shift in his life. It was night and day. And he was just absolutely ecstatic about it. So to me, there's nothing more rewarding than when I'm doing this work and a very powerful change happens. And even though those are extreme examples, in doing regression work in particular, and sometimes ideomotor work, the deeper work, the exploratory, that's not just suggestions. That's when, especially with the kind of comprehensive regression work that I do, a 15-step emotional clearing regression is a common example. Uh-huh. That I wrote. I had to write books about it because no one else was doing it, and I was looking for books that could augment the training, and I ended up writing a book on regression and a book on working with dreams and another book on regression, and because I couldn't find anything that was so powerful that could complement the kind of demonstrations we were doing in class.
Well, Randal, I really appreciate you coming on to the program today and sharing your knowledge and expertise and experience and training with us. If you'll hold on for just a minute, we're going to take a brief break here, and we will be back.
Okay, sounds great.
Very good. You've been listening to American Dreamtime. I'm your host, Robert Doc Barham. We've been speaking with Randal Churchill of the Hypnotherapy Training Institute about hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and beyond. We'll be right back.
Keeping the First Amendment alive. We are Fairfax County's cable access and internet radio station.
Hello, I'm Dr. Paul H. Smith, President and CEO of Remote Viewing Instructional Services, Inc. We are listening to American Dreamtime, the Robert Doc Barham Show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to tell your friends to listen too.
And welcome back. You are listening to American Dreamtime. I am your host, Robert Doc Barham, and today our guest, who we're having a wonderful conversation with for the past half hour or so, is Randal Churchill, the teacher of teachers, and he's from the Hypnotherapy Training Institute. Randal was just talking with us about one of his several books that he's written, and Randal, I wanted to respond to that, and I would like to share something. You said earlier about Milton Erickson, who was one of the three primary people who was modeled for NLP. Milton Erickson was a medical doctor, was he not?
Yes, he was.
And a psychiatrist as well, I believe.
Yes, that is correct.
And he was he was also
one of the major people that, in fact, many people call him one of the founders of hypnotherapy. I mean, those that call him the founder are incorrect because are the originator, because there were many, and but he was extremely influential and absolutely brilliant.
Now, he was also the head of the American Medical Association, right?
He was the head of the American Society for Clinical Hypnosis. I actually don't know if he was. I mean, you may have some information I don't have there. If he was the head of the AMA as well at some point.
Well, I remember reading at some point that he was someone who helped to get hypnosis recognized in. Okay, I just checked it on my computer on the web. It says it was not the head of the American Medical Association. He was a renowned psychiatrist specializing in medical hypnosis. What I remember very early on when I was first learning about hypnosis and hypnotherapy was that somewhere in like 1958 he helped to have hypnosis and hypnotherapy recognized as an efficacious methodology. Is that so?
Yes. He was one of those that, was having such an influence. Another one, I mean, there's so many positive things that could be said about Milton Erickson. And he's someone, we specifically addressed some of his, some specific things about his forms of therapy that he tended, and his general ideas that he had, and show a wonderful film of his as part of our level 1 courses. But another example, once again, to show that there were various major people during the middle of the 20th century that were beginning to open up minds about hypnotherapy. So, this is taken, still in those days, there was not that much. Most people didn't know what to make of it. Just only knew about stage hypnosis, or only a limited number of psychologists and physicians were using hypnosis. But another major person that helped the AMA to recognize hypnosis as a legitimate form of medical therapy was William Kroger, who had written a classic work in hypnosis called Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis. That the first edition was, I believe, 1956. It might have been 58. I think it was 56 in his first edition. And what he did was one of the things that influenced the AMA to accept hypnosis was he created 2 films at that time and shared it with the AMA. And one of the films was a woman who he was about to do surgery on her neck, and he gave her hypnosis that he was numbing her hand. It's called glove anesthesia. And so you watch her lying there and taking her hand and moving it to the side of her throat. That per the suggestion that the anesthesia on the hand would extend to the throat area, to the neck area, and then he performed surgery on her. And so you watch that. She's obviously has enough awareness to be able to move her hand and isn't just knocked out. And so that was the one film. And the other film was that he gave hypnosis for a cesarean. And suggestion was given this cesarean was filmed in its entirety. And the suggestion that was given was that the louder she sang, the better she would feel. And so as they're lifting the baby out, she is singing away and just, so happy and so ecstatic. and that did it. The AMA, between Kroger and Milton Erickson, and I don't think they needed anyone more besides those 2. I mean, okay, let's go for it. Yes, you can use hypnosis. It's a genuine form of therapy.
Well, the reason that I bring it up is that there are some folks who seem to think that, I'm going back to this from something we talked very early on about in the conversation. Some folks who seem to think that hypnosis and hypnotherapy are not used by, let's say, medical professionals, doctors, psychiatrists, and that's actually not the case. I know for myself, my probably one of my earlier experiences with hypnosis is when I took the Silva Method of Self-Mind Control course when I was 17 years old. My dad was a big proponent of self-help, personal growth and development material. And I watched my father come home from the public library every week, and there was always one or two books that were in his basket next to his chair that were about personal growth and development. And I remember even things like psychocybernetics and so many different books.
Right.
And he asked me, he said that it was good to read widely and deeply. And at one point he surprised me. For my 17th birthday, he got me that Silva Method of Self-Mind Control course. And in that course, that was one of the things that we did was glove anesthesia. And we had a group of about 30 participants, 30 students in that program. And that sent me along my way after that. I was blown away by the things that I learned in that multi-day course. And it got me to continue thinking about how can something like hypnosis and hypnotherapy used to influence the individual positively for transformation in various areas of life, one of which was health, and another which was in the area of performance. And a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago now, I came across the work of Dr. Ernest Rossi, who was a protege of, as I understand it, a protege of Milton Erickson. And in that book, and several books of his actually over the course of decades, he writes about what you talked about. It was ideomotor work, as well as he did some pilot studies. And in those pilot studies, he was trying to demonstrate that hypnotherapy is so powerful that it can affect the individual all the way down to genetic expression. And that really blew my mind when I read about that. So that's one of the reasons why I've been asking you to talk about what's possible, what's potential, what can be done, not primarily for the wow factor, but for the reality of it. What is it that we're capable of? And to my mind, the mind and body, that is sometimes that distinction, that separation is good. At other times, it can be an obscuring factor. And what I mean by that is if we are actually able to affect the expression of our DNA through our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, then we are mind and body as a unity. Would you agree with that?
Yes. The mind affects the body so much, and the body affects the mind so much, and they go so well together. It's so important. What I'm trying to say is that doing therapy, helping people with personal growth, that in so many situations you're working with the mind and the body that influence each other so much. There obviously is a mind and a body, but they're linked by the bloodstream and by thoughts and by so many things. It's so important.
So what do you have? Would you tell the audience the titles of the books that you have written that have been published so far?
Yes. Well, to start with, in our level 1 class, and these all of my books are most of the class texts in our program are books that I've written. And there's a book I've co-written, the most recent book, Churchill Canfield's Law: What Can Go Right Will Go Right, is something that is a combination, both a self-help book and a book that is that we use in level 1 is helping prospective hypnotherapists to find so many different ways to help their clients to turn around negative attitudes, to reframe things, to focus on the positive. So that's a book I've written with, as I mentioned, Cheryl Canfield earlier, and her amazing experience that is documented in the book Profound Healing. And so she is and has been a teacher of the program for the last 15 years, and she is the co-author of that book. So the remaining books, all of the other books I've written, and the transcripts the manuscripts, of unfinished books are all books that are relevant to the advanced use of hypnosis, to exploratory hypnosis. And starting in our level 2 class and throughout our program, we use a few chapters each level of class of regression hypnotherapy, transcripts of transformation, in which some of the chapters are built around transcripts and commentary, and other chapters are about the theory and the importance of regression and all. And an area that many hypnotherapists get only limited training or no training at all in, and training to, for example, if they do have some training, it's to be sure to detach the person, and sometimes it's very important to detach the person so that they can avoid the trauma of an experience if that's where they're going. And so often we're dealing with difficult experiences from the past, often in childhood, that sometimes we want to be the person to be detached, but depending upon ideomotor signals to determine where to go with the regression, as is demonstrated in the book, often people are open to being, understanding that by being able to deal with the memories and emotions, it gives more of a range of more, sometimes more profound, sometimes much more profound possibility for therapy, to do therapy that much deeper, and to purge emotions and so forth. And so that's a book. That's the first advanced book that people get in the course, and then we have another level 1, level 2 text that's the main one for those levels, but not by me, and then the primary level 3 text is Become the Dream: The Transforming Power of Hypnotic Dream Work, and the first edition of this book was the original. The first book. The first edition was the first book about the integration of dreams and hypnosis. It wasn't the first book to, have, there was, a couple of books that had a small chapter somewhere along the lines of dream analysis in hypnosis, but and books that someone would suggest you have a healing dream. But this entire book is about hypnosis and dream work, and we all doing dream work with hypnosis, which I take a Gestalt approach rather than an analytical approach, which I feel is very powerful and naturally hypnotic. And so what we're really doing with hypnotic dream work, which I trademarked forever ago, is that we're taking a form of therapy that is naturally hypnotic and giving more hypnotic tools at the therapist's and client's disposal there. And so the fact is that we all dream, and there aren't a lot of hypnotherapists outside of graduates of our program that do. It's a pretty small percentage outside of our graduates that do that do hypnosis and dream work together in some way or other. But we all dream every night, whether we remember any of our dreams or not. Electroencephalogram, dream cycle, if it's not interrupted, to be about every hour and a half if the sleep is not interrupted, and we go through a dream cycle. And so we can have the experience then of doing a lot of very, very good work with hypnotic dream work. And so I have so many things. We have so many things. I'm the main instructor, but we have other instructors as well that have various specialties. And there's so many things to cover that I'll do a lecture, a demonstration, a practice session, a group hypnosis working with dreams that cover, about 2/3 of a day. But that's usually it. And except in our graduate program that we only get a chance usually to show one demonstration for dream work. So every dream session is so very different. And this is a fantastic form of therapy. And then level 4, the book Catharsis and Regression Hypnotherapy, is something that is used in level 4 and is our primary text in our graduate program. as well. And again, we're still using the regression book, Volume 1. This is the second volume of the 2-volume set. These are hardbound books totaling about 900 pages, a little over 900 pages. And so they're filled with a lot of wonderful examples of the power of this therapy. And you can tell by the title, Catharsis and Regression Hypnotherapy, that it's something in which, in many cases, you can do some very powerful emotional clearing work, and it can be very healing work. And by asking questions to get guidance from, asking the subconscious mind, where do we go with this? And the person says, yes, regress me, and yes, I want to be open to my emotions. That's where we take it. I've never had anyone regret that. There have been times when someone said, no, I want to be detached from my emotions, that later said that, they wish, in fact, later signaled with their finger signals later in the therapy session, look, I'm ready for my emotions now, that they volunteered that. And so, but I've never seen it the other way. This is a really safe thing to do that a lot of hypnotherapists don't know how to do, or I've heard that in regression, you could create a false memory, so you don't want to learn how to do regression, you don't want to do regression. And the fact is that if you're doing regression incorrectly, yes, you could create a false memory. And none of our graduates have ever had that problem. I've never had that problem. You just need to know how to do it.
Yeah. Randal, my conscious, subconscious, and superconscious minds are all in alignment to say thank you for being here today. We have to wrap up. I would love to go on for another hour, but we are at the top of the hour, and I would like to thank Randal Churchill, the teacher of teachers from the Hypnotherapy Training Institute, to come on to American Dreamtime today and talk about what is possible with hypnosis and hypnotherapy, healing, performance, and beyond. Randal, again, thanks.
Thank you so much, Robert Doc. It's been a pleasure, and I've appreciated. I've had a wonderful time and appreciated all of your excellent questions.
Come back again soon, all right?
All right, you take care.
Okay, thanks. Folks, you've been listening to American Dreamtime. My name is Robert Doc Barham. I am your host. We're here every week on Radio Fairfax, Fridays from 2 to 3 p.m. East Coast time. We will talk with you again.